because I think you guys are doing fantastic things, and not always you have time to share and reflect on what you're doing. So the idea is, well, the space is yours. I will make questions. I will be really focused on what you are saying, trying to be really sharp, and then I will take notes and see if this, how can I fit this in my maps and stuff. But the idea is really, okay, let's see what you guys are doing, because I have this sensation that it's a beautiful thing and I want to know more.
Wonderful. Count us in. We'll do the best we can.
Sounds like a fun session.
Yeah. So I don't know, I have this idea of first, but you have really initiated this in very different containers, right? Different cultures, different needs, different departure points. So my first curiosity is, well, what is starting in each of the places? And what do you see? Okay, this is really the same. This is really a common pattern. These are things that we adjust because of the conversations we had. So this would be the first framing, perhaps, of what we can do. But then if you feel that it's more important to talk about something else, feel also free to take it where you feel that it should be. But this first phrasing, it's
yeah, that's a good starting point. Yeah, I'm happy to have a first stab. And yeah, as you know, we're kind of focusing on a few distinct acupuncture points of the planet, I'd like to say. And these are also relatively strategic. They're sort of like key places for, you know, transmuting the current financial system, current power structures, so to say. So for example, a lot of our work has been right now, previous to this, in Central Europe. So Liechtenstein, Austria, Switzerland, that Germany corner, which is already like a financial center of the world with a lot of influence. And another central point that we've been focusing on is Central Scandinavia, focused on that region of Dalarna in Sweden. That also has its unique influential points for various reasons. I can go into detail later on. And then another major pressure point, acupuncture point, is Central America, which is, you know, essentially also a bridge between the north and the south, and also a pathway for a lot of not just biodiversity but also culture. And each of these have particularities that in the global framework are really sort of key battlegrounds for this to unfold. And of course, each of them have some similarities, but they also have very different cultural needs and cultural realities, so to say. One thing that we can apply is that, you know, at the end of the day, each of these cultures is in one way or another also disenfranchised by the financial system. Even if it's like Liechtenstein being the richest country in the world by GDP per capita, but at the same time, there's some vacuums that the richness has left, so to say, which is also, you know, this erosion of family, lack of spending free time with the community, and sort of like this erosion of culture that is also almost taken over by money. So it also leaves up an opening for us to start tickling. Also, something about Liechtenstein is it's in that Rhine Valley bioregion, which involves these 4 countries. It's also that it has this 4-country aspect, which has a few currencies, but at the same time, one cultural language group, and where already borders are relatively redundant. So we can really play on that concept for something to unfold. Sweden, on the other hand, and Scandinavia, you know, it's also seen in perspective-wise for the rest of the planet as a very solid model that the rest of the world follows immediately. They have a really good reputation. Some ways it's true, some ways it's actually just optics in terms of how things are organized. But it's also, you know, a wonderful example of the welfare state. So one of the things that we've been doing there is essentially mirroring what the welfare state is doing, simply now with seeds. So you can actually have a more amplification to it and more on a regenerative front as well. So there is also that opportunity to really transmute what the government is there doing it, but doing it in a way that they have already this solid structures that we are just replicating to be able to tap into the framework of existence there. Then again, Central America, this is also something almost in terms of prophecies. It's like they always say it here is the prophecy of the eagle and the condor that will be flying together. It's always this north meets south, and we will all align in one framework. And then Central America is always a bridge for that. So it's always where somehow historically it's been sort of on the grinder between this clash of worlds, but it's also there for the perfect pace to transmute it from there, to really create a bridge that really will unite the north and the south. And in all of this, what we're focusing is on the unique cultural richnesses that it has. Whether it's Scandinavia, you can really speak to their Swedish, their Viking, their Sami roots, and really kind of almost like in a reflection of this wild nature-connected people and the culture of seafaring, fearlessness. This is something that they love. Same with Latin America, focusing on the indigenous communities, on the indigenous cultures, on the ancient future way of life. For example, Central America, cacao, has been a currency for forever. So it's also not too far off to jump into seeds, because seeds has always been here the dominant medium of exchange. It's just that we don't realize it, or we must have forgotten. And really by focusing on those key things, it becomes there's already a lot of trust to be built and to be recognized. And by really creating models or pilots around these things, it becomes very easy to find alignment in terms of alliances and spread those seeds.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to compliment with something. Or...
Yes, go, Lisa, go.
Go ahead, Paulo. No, I can jump in.
Two things really. I was very curious about two things. So the first is this idea of the strategic direction. It sounds really very articulated, and the other is how you pick on the culture to build the prototypes. So I really would like to love to hear you around, okay, what that is in concrete. So picking one or two examples on how you build it on top of what is already there alive, let's say. And maybe one Southern Europe and one North, because it gives, like, let's say, the link you are talking about.
Yeah. So, for example, let's say the Rhine Valley region. This is, as mentioned, one of the wealthiest places in the world, and this is, concretely with blockchain. It's the first Liechtenstein, at least from the region. It's the first country with a national framework for blockchain. So there's already a lot of infrastructure around that. There's already lots of legal backing to do things as we're doing, and you can already enter that playground in a very easy way. At the same time, for example, it's a country with the highest degree of democracy. So it's also a not far of a push to say, look, you can actually go door by door to all 38,000 inhabitants of Liechtenstein and say, look, we have actually a nicer even way to do democracy. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's very kind of continuing that same flow that's already going. Another example of what we're doing in for example, Liechtenstein is we have two main projects there. One is around food, local food, and one is around energy sovereignty. So there we already have good networks that are working around, for example, food and energy, and we're interconnecting them in this cooperative framework. And for example, around energy, there has already been beautiful pushes, and there's already good funding and alliances almost set up there to kind of integrate those. So really like adding the cooperative layer to what already exists there is very easy to accelerate. And that's exactly what we're seeing. You know, we're then tapping into the different foundations. Liechtenstein is fantastic because it has more organizations and foundations than it has individuals. So it's also like a hotbed for things to transform and yeah, to bring in alliances in the forward. At the same time, we have an advantage that Lisa's from there. And so we have also, you know, there is one of the only places where I've seen that you can literally call your government and be like, hey, what's up? And, you know, you plan it, they all are kind of interrelated. So it's a very easy to navigate and have access. So we've also are really well connected with the government there as well. And we're receiving a lot of opening doors from them.
And in that case, I hear two things, but I would like to see if there's more. So I hear, okay, a part is really showing possibilities, and it's a lot of conversations that probably unfolded. I don't know what would be the result of that and how you will approach it, but maybe this is useful. But that's what I heard, conversations. And the other part is really activation. It's really, okay, there are already these players that are doing this, and we synergize with them and show them also the possibilities. And it's basically activation and alliances and this type of thing that it's built, or it's more than that. Or is there something that you approach already in a sense of prototype?
Yeah, that is definitely a very, very big part of it. The talking to people, listening, and then also sharing about experiences and possibilities, and starting to dream in that moment and showcase or at least talk about what are all the things that could be possible, or what are all the things that we had been thinking of, how to connect and network. And I think a lot just happens through listening and then saying, hey, but you can do this, you have been doing this, here is the support. Mm-hmm.
And when you go to the support, it's basically activation, like bringing proposals, or it's something more?
I feel that it's a lot of connection of the different players. So it seems like so many people are doing incredible stuff, but they're all doing it by themselves. And there's not enough cooperation happening. Everybody's going in a similar direction, but they don't support each other. Maybe there's no time, there's not enough something. And that's a big, like, just sparking the connections.
Mm.
Yeah. Just to add to that, it's a lot about, you know, cultural catalyzing culture forward, because we're coming from a world where a lot of, like Lisa was saying, a lot of these organizations have been used to competing for funding and working in their little islands and not realizing how it all integrates way beyond that. So it's kind of like making them aware of the power from working together, from cooperating into this cooperative framework. And that's what we're able to add with the technology that we have, which wasn't there. So it's all of this integrative process where we're essentially bringing that awareness, where now it's more efficient and effective to collaborate and work together rather than in their fragmented silos.
Can you perhaps tell a story of one of these conversations, what was told, to the extent that you remember it, that really shifted and you saw something happen, so that we grasp a little bit of what that is? Because what you are saying fundamentally is building relationships, which is the thing that we know makes the difference. But then how do people acknowledge possibilities, and how do you see them unfolding and supporting them after this moment?
Yeah, so it's I can do a little bit of a story. Yeah, for example, around energy sovereignty. It's been very interesting because, of course, you know, Liechtenstein, or like that core of the bioregion of the Rhine Valley, is known to be as the place of the world with the highest solar energy. They're like the solar champions of the world, so to say. They have really pride in that. So having conversations around that, you know, you can say, okay, redefine what really champion really means, and making them aware that it's even more viable to even create a system that where the consumers are not just the consumers as such, but there also can be also producers. So this sort of new consciousness where the line between a consumer and a producer starts fading away, because essentially anyone can then own their own grid system and eventually make it as a business model, which wasn't really that clear before to them. But now with the cooperative framework of energy production, where the users or the producers are also the consumers, and then eventually you don't have to just consume electricity on a regular basis as we know it, but you actually become the owner and can actually make a profit out of transitioning into a more beneficial model was very eye-opening to them. So it's kind of like you always see where you're able to see the light bulbs in people's go up, and they're like, oh wow. And that's where they are then out of their own will inspired to do the same and keep growing the movement. So it has this beautiful synergistic effect in everything that we're doing, because it's all about weaving those relationships and networks together to find more benefits to the entire system by just aligning in efforts and purpose.
And I feel that the turning point in these conversations is very often when there's this understanding that we can come from the perspective of abundance. We can look at everything from that perspective, and we don't have to look at it from the scarcity perspective anymore. And because that speaks to everybody. These are all people like each of us, and they've been searching. They know there's something, and now all of a sudden you confirm what they somehow knew deep in their gut. I think that's the turning point. Let's say the convincing happens there.
And when is the moment where seeds becomes relevant in that discussion? Because all that conversation could be held and it makes sense, and you don't even have to mention seeds, apart from seeds being the concrete possibility of abundance, right? It's made visible. Is just it, or how do you mingle in that specific case of energy? Because I think this would be true for many places, right? Portugal has a lot of sun, so I was thinking, okay, I can do exactly the same. So how can I follow that? I think I lost you.
Yeah, essentially any part of the planet can follow.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry about that. The internet here is a bit unsteady.
Do you hear us again?
It's perfect now, and the image
Let
as
me know
well.
when you can hear us.
I can hear
If
you.
you
I can hear you now.
Okay.
So you were saying about when to bring in seeds
Yeah.
into a conversation like that.
How to mingle seeds with that possibility, right? How seeds becomes part of that possibility. How do you did it? That
It's
energy
it always depends strategically. Yeah, it always depends strategically, kind of how you are with who you're dealing with and how. That I actually see that it always focuses is, not even if sometimes if you just say a new currency, a new financial system, people are like raising eyebrows. But one easy way is it's simply describing it as an accounting system, a cooperative accounting system that allows multiple players to operate as a decentralized cooperative. And when you explain like the models where you could say, okay, for example, contribution accounting and decentralized payroll and having these frameworks on the blockchain, there it becomes very, very easy for people to understand that without even going into like the in-depths of the financial systems and currency fluctuations. Of course, if it's someone who is already very receptive to financial systems and ecosystems, sometimes the easiest strategies is to explain seeds or the the economical model behind seeds, and that already is a very powerful push. But many people are not in that space of mind, so it's always very interesting to see how one navigates and brings these points across. I think that's also very important, really, to understand in each context and culture what are the pressure points, and really what motivates someone, where are they coming from. And that's where that diversity, or that really the understanding, makes a big difference. You know, like, you're gonna have to incentivize someone in Liechtenstein who's maybe making $1 million a year versus someone here who is making less than $1 a week. It's a completely sort of like different mindset. And yeah, but in the end of the day, it's all about interconnecting and finding ways to, you know, unity in power. Power is unity, and then everyone understands that.
And in South America, how are you approaching it? What is different? And if you could tell another story of some project that probably is good.
Talk about Chahul or Ishil.
Yeah, and here it's also mind-boggling, and it's very historical, I feel, because, you know, we're weaving in this beautiful, you know, ancient cultures, like, for example, here in Guatemala, the indigenous. And even within a bioregion, there's also acupuncture points within that bioregion. So, for example, in Guatemala, where you see population, 60% of the population are still indigenous communities, and then 40% are more urban or like mixed Latinos. And it also has a very long history of suffering, of war, of corruption, of colonialism over colonialism. So, for example, here, one of the pressure points that we've focused is the smallest minority of Guatemala, which is the Ixil group, which are in the heartland of the country, in the very remote areas, and completely disenfranchised throughout history. They've been really at the very edge of the suffering from colonialism. So then it also becomes a very interesting conversation to have, because I see it as the highest potential for regeneration. So if you see it from that perspective, and you really find what motivates them, and that there's already this feeling of being left disenfranchised, that one can just go in there and transmute. So, for example, this last few weeks has been really beautiful, because, you know, these communities have their own form of governance that is parallel to the central government, and really by just focusing on that, it's already like another way of tapping into. And it's fascinating, because many times they don't know how to read or write, but they know how to operate the blockchain. And it's all this conversation about understanding, helping them understand that this is, you know, it's, in the end of the day, it's nothing new. It's again seeds. It's the same concept of how our ancestors also used to exchange with cacao beans, with coffee beans, with other fruits and vegetables that were not easily buried under the ground as the Spanish did. And also, you know, the ways of governance. It's all about collaborative decision making. It's about of really transparency in the ways that our decisions are made, and working towards the community, not just a few. So these are some subjects that they really, really easily grasp and are incentivized to continue.
But there isn't technology a barrier?
It could be a barrier, but it's also an enabler. So yeah, it's many people have already a mobile phone, and it has become as a very powerful tool, you know, for being able to communicate, to organize. And now it's the next level where they can, you know, access funds, access banking, decentralized finance, in which before they had, or they still have, zero access to. You know, even these people don't have access to normal bank accounts, and now we make it as easy as downloading an app.
And what that changes, because I see there the adoption being then fast, right? Because they understanding, you explain the technology. What changes? What is changing, and how is are things changing? Because my imagination tells me that probably they have already a very um, circular economy in the practical sense, in the being in a probably from scarcity of the context, but they probably already exchange a lot, right? So what is it bringing for them?
Yeah, it's the difference there is that, you know, as you say, these communities have been in an artificial state of scarcity where you know currency is scarce, so they don't have the quetzales to give valuation to this contributions or exchanges that they already make. And now with seeds, they have a currency. They have something to give value to those exchanges. And interestingly enough, then that value is growing consistently. So it's been very beautiful to kind of go from a place where people maybe at first were like, oh, okay, digital seed, I'm not too sure about this. But then like 2 or 3 months ago, they're like already seeing how the value goes up and it's approaching the local currency. And they're already in the mindset that this will then supersede the national currency, and then we'll go to the US dollar. So there's already lots of excitement from them to just continue, you know, giving this exchange and then seeing that this is a currency that is helping everybody float up in a universally equitable way. So, for example, for me, it's always very powerful to explain to them, like, you know, our labor here in Guatemala shouldn't be any less worth than the labor in the US. And here you have this phenomenon that, you know, the youth or the people who don't get any access to a job have to migrate to other places. And now we're kind of changing that model. We're saying, look, the access to funds is decentralized. It can be done from any rural area in the world. All you need is internet access. And therefore, we're bringing about this rural renaissance. So it's very, very inspiring to see that people are grasping that and are excited to really bring value to their communities and completely engage in new ways of exchanging.
And we're working, for example, with a committee of regenerative agricultures who have by themselves come up with a system how to visit each other's gardens and give points to each other according to the biodiversity and according to the medicinal ancient species that they used to have and they used to know before. And the more different species in different categories you have, the more points you get and the more seeds you get rewarded with in the, they have a competition and a winner and a second and a third place, I think once or twice a year. And that's incredible. And now they are these people who are all preserving ancient ways of living in harmony with nature and also talking with their grandparents and the older people to find out how it was done also during the war here. They are now building up, they have now a space close to the local market where they can set up their market space and exchange. And now they're looking for an extra space where they can also set up a little restaurant, a comedor, where you can just go and for your 10-15 quetzales, which is $2 or so, you can get your lunch. And that way, when you can then also start buying food with seeds, and then from the local women weavers cooperative that is already creating different things with seeds as well, you can sell their products there. That's also, they know exactly how to do this. All they needed was the tool to kickstart coming back into this thinking of abundance again. And it's incredibly beautiful. Then you have these communities, committees starting up and starting to cooperate with each other. And then there's, it's all interconnected because we got to know some of these committees through this young man that we met who is going through a local university there that was created to keep the young people there and to solve social and cultural problems in the towns. So they work also a lot in solving problems between neighbors or just the topics that come up. And this young man is also part of one of the indigenous, how do you say alcaldía?
Like local government,
in
indigenous
the
government.
local government, and that's where he's bringing in seeds too, and just needs support and ideas and examples.
So let me see if I got it so far in Guatemala, right? So I will tell you what I heard with some quality in São Paulo in it.
Mhm.
So what you guys are doing, it's fundamentally you are relation magicians because you know how to build them. You go there and start talking to people and seeing these relational patterns and making them very visible to each other, right? And you go there and you start having conversations, and then you throw seeds. You throw seeds away, you put seeds in the ecosystem, and you continue the conversations because you are able then to mingle what is already alive there in this variety of plants, and you start suggesting, but if you do it this way or this way, and you create these possibilities, and then people just figure out what, because they get it. Once they get it, it's done. You don't need, you did your job, kind of thing. You hosted the space, you created the relationship container. You didn't even explain much more. You just pinpointed things that they were already doing that could be amplified by seeds and was already regenerative. You create this sense of abundance and have these conversations around abundance. And then people get it and they start doing stuff. Would this be
Yes,
a nice summary?
yes. Yes, it's a good summary, and some of the lenses to make those points that you mentioned perhaps more explicit is that, like, for example, the way that my mind works is all about systems working, and I understand, for example, in the framework of culture, all of these layers of capital, but capital in capital C, where we're really talking about spiritual capital, cultural capital, natural capital, intellectual capital. And my framework or my worldview is a very integral culture thereof that really makes already borders redundant. And by really understanding how those exchanges of multiple forms of capital go in multiple varieties of places, and then you can really use that framework and see the people who are working within those streams of multiple forms of capital and really nudge them. So identify those superpowers and gifts that are already weaving patterns. So we're essentially like weaving, helping that tapestry to be woven by the people who have the gifts, and really doing it in a framework that goes beyond this myopic understanding of capital, where we're coming from, into more of a holistic form of capital that integrates all these other beautiful things.
And this is where this links to this idea of abundance that Lisa was speaking about, right? Because what you then go and do is you give value to things that people take for granted and frequently are told that are of no value.
Mm-hmm.
And you start just saying, this is not, we can think it differently. So please value this, because this is where the value is. This is what we need. You are already doing it. So let's value that. And here you have an economy that values precisely this. So let's put this into value because you guys are doing a fantastic work, kind of thing. And there it goes. Is this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And also something that Franz mentioned before, here, especially with indigenous people, we're not that far, we're not as far away as we are in Europe from still knowing that cultural capital and spiritual capital and knowledge, all of this has value, and the nature. It's still there in the traditions. So it's not even so hard to come back to that understanding.
In Europe, right?
I feel like here in Central America.
In Central America, for sure. But in Europe, are
In
we
Europe,
further away from that or not?
I feel as a general society, we are a bit further away.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of like cultural myth that already says, that, for example, just a simple fact, if you see it from a global perspective, that the European culture is better than all the other cultures in the world. That's been the colonialist worldview. Of course, not all Europeans think that, but it's like that's the narrative that we have been spoon-fed throughout multiple generations. But then in the other end, it's like, so it's been sort of like this narrative of praising the colonialist culture that has also eroded the original European culture. So that's almost like standardized. And of course, it has disadvantages and advantages. But at least, for example, in comparison to that, I think the first peoples of the world are still much more connected to that natural alignment of life and its right relationship between community and place than the mainstream cultural point of view that has been more fragmented or is kind of based on trauma in a big way. But yeah, that's one thing. And another thing that I wanted to say is that kind of summarizing also what you say, one very easy way to kind of summarize what we've been doing is, spreading hope, because hope is such a powerful thing. And it's, what we're actually going is planting seeds of hope in precisely the pockets where we know that are the most fertile ground for that hope to be planted. And, fear spreads very strongly like a virus, but hope spreads even faster. And if you're able to kind of give the right nudges to the right leaders in different communities, then it starts having a life of its own.
And I sense that there's something important about your vision of the bridge of the North and South. Can you speak a little bit about that? What you are doing this kind of work in Europe, it's a kind of two layers, right? So you pick it on the positive of what we are bringing in terms of the best democracy or very high levels kind of stuff, but you try to see the roots of the things that we lost over time, right? Going into the essence of the cultures, right? So that you bring it from the 2 points, right? Kind of bringing it, making this coherent, and in the connection with North and South, what is there?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question and one that I really love. There is this connection, as you say, north-south, but there's also the connection east-west. So it's actually 4 planes of sort of like cultural PowerPoints that has had or has accrued to. For example, the North framework could be seen more scientific in like rigor, while South could be maybe more like fun or cultural rich, while the East is maybe a bit more sort of like from that spiritual discipline. But then also the West has also another aspect of that. And when you integrate these 4 directions, you have an integral worldview where you have the strengths of each of these perspectives and you can interweave it into a culture of integrity, which is the sweet spot, which is, I think, that evolution in consciousness and in culture that we're all moving towards. And that's also something that we haven't seen in any framework of recent history. So it's also something that is not very present in our minds, but I know it's possible. And it's also something that is a reality in many of the prophecies in each of these segments of culture, in terms of the spiritual capital or the elders. And knowing that that's possible, that you can really integrate the best of all worlds into a cohesive whole, it's something that's very exciting for me, and I also know for Lisa.
Well, that's something very powerful, because I never thought of this, like I never did this connection, that now that you made it, it's like the egg of Columbus, the story, right? Don't you know it?
No.
Columbus, I would tell the Columbus egg. The Columbus, this is a tale that Columbus was trying, and there's another reason for telling this story, that Columbus was trying to convince everyone on the journey, and that the earth was round. No one believed it. And then he did a test that said, let's pick a chicken egg and see from whomever is here on the room, we can put the chicken egg really upright, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people were trying, and of course the egg was falling, and that kind of stuff. And the rule was that the content could not be split it over. That was the only rule. They could do whatever they wanted with the egg, but the content needed to be on inside the egg.
Mhm.
No one managed. And after a while, he said, "Okay, can you boil me this egg?" Yes. And then a cook boiled the egg, brought the boiled egg, and he just did this with the egg, and the egg stood. So it was evident. Once you did it, it's evident. That's the Colombo's egg. I never did this connection of our cultural nature being really mimic the shamanic uh, cardinal points. I never did it before. And that's what you are picking up. That's so beautiful. I never did it. Thank you for that. Wow.
Yeah, it's a very powerful thing. That's also, for example, the organization that we have had before is called Integrity, because it's all about this integration of elements and of cultures and of directions. And to be able to see the world with that framework really, really makes it's like a compass. It becomes like a compass for navigating any difficulties in life in general. So it really makes things easy to see it from that worldview.
That's so beautiful. And that's a reason why people frequently from different cardinal points, they travel around to get a little bit of the thing that they are missing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that could be a connection. I don't know what else you are building, but it just popped up for me. So tell me a little bit more of how you mingle this, how you bring the north to the south and the south to the west and so on and so forth. How are you cross-pollinizing that?
For me, it's my birth legacy, because I am already a seed for that, in the sense you see, as a third culture child being born between a place like Austria with that culture and a place like Guatemala. And then my journey in life is all about kind of not belonging to either and being confused for a while. And then fortunately having the possibility to travel and really sort of kind of fill those gaps, and then realized coming to this integral worldview where things became clear, and then kind of realizing that it's up to each individual to co-create a culture of integrity. And yeah, that's then the framework that I use. Like, I consider myself a cultural evolution catalyst. So just by the words or the energies that one vibrates in that space, it's something that many people also feel familiar to, because it's also the human framework. And by understanding that, and really kind of like what we were mentioning before, really incentivizing the pieces for each human's gift towards that possibility out there, it becomes something where it really spreads hope, and it becomes a co-creative experiment of creating a new way.
I will bring back this idea to, because I have to drop it. It's so alive in me. I have to drop it. So sorry for that. So sorry for bringing a little bit of me.
No.
2 days ago,
Please,
I 2 days ago, I had this conversation with this fantastic woman, a Portuguese lady, that was together with me in the One Data. And we were having this deep dialogue around this moment in history for Portugal and Spain, that together for the first time we are celebrating the Magalhães trip around the world.
Wow.
And it will happen in a couple of days. That would be the 500 years, which is really symbolic again.
Mm-hmm.
And the angle we were bringing is of a certain, a sort of closeness of that, what that means in that. Going around the globe to be back to the departure point, because that's we were with this sensation that that's where it all began. kind of thing, if you know what I mean. And we were seeing that she was seeing and she was noticing that to me, and now I see it, that there was a certain kind of closure. And the interesting part of that is that the total trip, although it's celebrated and narrated as a big achievement, is a complete disaster. From all angles, is a complete disaster. Because there were 200 men going out, 18 coming back. We horrorized with the stories that they tell about the journey itself. And with this statement that the people were going out because there was everything that the unknown could bring was better than staying. So that was the motive for the 200 people, not Magalhães eventually, but for the 200 people to go on sail around the world.
Yeah.
And there was this closeness of a certain loop, because if we look at Portuguese and then all Europe, but Portuguese and Spanish and the impact we had on the world with being slave traders and so on and so forth, there's this closeness of this loop that sounds very, very powerful. And now linking this with the cardinal points is like making the round and making this integrals again. And I have to say that was what came to my mind. So the second thing that I want to say is really, you guys are, and I knew that before I started the conversation, but still. So I was deformed in computer science, and I have the mindset of an engineer. That's how normally I present myself. So the idea of a prototype for me was very mechanical. The questions for you. So that's nothing compared to what you are doing in terms of the mechanical of that. Although somehow I did it like, well, a little bit like that, not with all the beauty that you are bringing in Portugal naturally, because I never thought of trying to impose it or come up with a model. I never thought, but I was always on that edge, and that's what I see. And now, telling this story of this completely different nature of pilots that we are talking about, how can we tell the story that we bring it into the integrity that you guys hold? How can we do that? Because what I see in the old realm of seeds, it's more of the mechanical mindset, and I'm really on the middle of the world because I'm drawn to both. But I know that the mechanical will never have the answers. I have this in me, but the question is, how can we bring this into the world? Because, and the second question is, you probably are observing these kind of discussions where you see this and still you hold the space, and it's so fantastic. What are you seeing and in these regards? How can we tell this story?
Okay. I feel like a lot of last year we also spent in between and trying to bridge, and we came from when we were working with fully integrity.earth before interweaving seeds. It was also always about the culture and the people and their understanding, and then seeds is the perfect tool to weave it all together. But then because seeds also needed support, then we needed to start to be the bridge and be, like you say, the mechanical and the cultural and spiritual and connect. And now we have been able to let go of that a bit, because it's moving, it's going, and moving forward again to the edge of the movement, let's say, and do the weaving there. And what I feel tells the most beautiful and important story are all these people. So all the people that are on the ground, and if we can listen to their story and to hear the moment for them when the shift happened or the understanding came, I think for me, that's how we can tell the story, by listening to them and allowing them to share from their point of view.
Yeah, and also from my side, first I want to say, Paolo, that also saluting your amazing work, and not to undermine it, because you're doing epic work with what you do, and you know that, and everybody who works with you knows that too. So first, that right off the bat. Yeah, you know, what we're sharing is essentially the collective story. So it's not the story that is done by Lisa or by Paulo or by Franz or by Reiki or by Nick or by anyone. We're actually inviting everybody to co-create on this amazing story of where we are essentially all one, where once we have that sort of integral understanding of the interconnectedness of our human design and planet and universe and cosmos, from the macro to the micro, it's a story of unfoldment, of really that evolution in human consciousness and our relationship between who we are and the world around us. And in that context, one needs to hold a lot of space, because it's a journey of unfoldment, as many people are still in multiple parts of that evolution. And you know, one beautiful way that you say it is that sort of like mechanistic worldview, which is also a bit of the dominant where we're coming from. But one of the things that has helped me in this journey, and I'm stepping into much more, like also kind of being pulled between, to realize that you don't have to be pulled between. You are essentially a bridge between that new way of really that mechanistic and that sort of like scientific or reductionist in many ways is also a part of something whole. And knowing that there is no difference between that mechanistic and the spiritual, or like the magic and the logic, as I like to say, that actually they have always been one, or also, you know, the spirit and the science, that they also always have been one. It's just our fragmented understanding has kind of separated those two things. Then it becomes a really beautiful journey of really infusing back that magic, again, bringing back that spirit, bringing back, you know, also when it comes to the duality between female and male, also giving a space to the female energy in as equals. And when that happens, then it's again the collective story, and it's a beautiful one to be co-creating with you.
Oh, amazing. And thank you for the kind words. I was wondering to whom we should talk then. Who are these people in these various places that you started things that we should talk to? Because maybe that's the second round of these kind of conversations. We can bring these people and talk to them, and eventually bring them together as well. If that's if I don't know if there's a language barrier or not, but if not, how could we bring them together as well? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know, in terms of that journey in the last maybe 2 years, one of the things that we've been amazed at is that, you know, some of the key people to focus on are essentially the wisdom keepers, the elders who know these things, but through various cultures have or not have been very vocal about it. But they're the ones who have been holding that space for a very long time. And these are found everywhere in the planet still. And it's also like star seeds, you know, they're kind of constantly popping up everywhere. And these are some of our, in my eyes, one of the most important target points to focus on, because they hold the space for all of the other cultures. So if you see also from some of our work with, you know, the planetary ceremony of light in New Year's, and this last with the elders, a lot of the things that we have been doing behind the scenes is this very strange thing that I've never even thought that was going to be part of my journey, but it's sort of like multi-dimensional diplomacy, where we're like really bringing in this new concept to the elders and really building that trust at a very non-mechanistic way, in a very more like vibrational aspect of things. And really what's something that's been forming out of that is that everyone is ready to have this universal framework for allowing that diversity to come through and celebrating that diversity between cultures, that it's no longer something that divides us, but it should be something that unites us. So that's also right now one big thing that we're trying to figure out with all these elders is really how can we create this framework for the entire planet where everybody is included and that leaves no one behind. And that's a key place to focus, I think.
Yeah, and just wanting to give a small example. We have been talking with many different wisdom keepers over the past 1 or 2 years. And what each one of them does when usually Franz starts explaining seeds more and more is that they feel into it. And we've heard lots of different comments, like it still feels young, or you can feel the energy of the people and there are small eruptions and things, but each and every one of them feels, and that's also why there is a big acceptance and welcoming, that it's grounded and it really comes from a place of abundance and of love for people. Every person who is part of this, who has given their vibrations into it, really does it for something larger than themselves. And it's like getting a yes check, let's move forward. Like Franz says, multi-dimensionally. and that has been, also a motivation and an energizer for everything.
But those elders are precisely the ones that you are giving voice into the various festivals. So the Light Festival, and now, so those are the ones, right?
These are the starting points. We would love to, it's as inclusive as possible. And that's also what we've been sort of needing to navigate, because there's a lot of cultural trauma between and trust issues from a lot of the cultures that have been suffering a lot. So one very important aspect is to really create that inclusive framework that we can hold space for all the voices out there and really create the space of coherence where we can be more than the sum of the individual parts.
I'm amazed. I don't know if I have another question, probably another summary. So not only you are going to the roots of culture as much as you can, but you are engaging with the elders of those cultures, because that's where the essence of many of the things and also the visibility of many of the traumas are. So you are going there and making these voices aware, and it is both a possibility of a new future and a container for this new possibility, right? It's and a motive for the conversation to talk. Not necessarily that maybe they need to onboard it at each moment, but there's a realization of the potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think that for ending, and thank you for your time so far. I think that it's really this open question. What else do you think that I should ask, or that you want to tell that it's alive now?
Well, I would love to tell you about each and every example and project in person, just because I feel each one has such a beautiful story. But I think maybe the time for that is not now.
That's another possibility, to go really on one by one and start telling the story around it. And yeah, I think that's another path forward. So let's reserve more time to do that. I would love to hear, man.
Yeah. One thing that I'd like to also add is, that the context of where we are in our human history, like if you see what's happening all around us, there's essentially it's a story being written. So we have multiple possible outcomes, and yeah, that essentially there's also a lot of trouble out there, and that trouble is also sort of dominating or steering things in a very strong way. But at the same time, wherever there's this balance of one darkness rising, also the counterpart must rise too. So it's a very, very exciting time in our human existence where we are really, really writing that history as we do in every little moment. And that's also one of the things that really excites me in all that work that we're doing, that we're really, really at the edge of that emergence and at the very perimeters, opening that space for coherence, and at a very critical time in our existence of a civilization. So it's super fun to be doing this.
Yeah, I'll share this excitement and passion and energy. Well, so thank you for that. I think this is the first one. I really loved doing this. Again, my mechanicist mind was thinking, well, now I do a map. I don't know what I will do with all the sharing, but it's in me. Now it's in me, and I will try to honor it and bring it into this realm of possibilities, because these kind of patternings, I think they are super important. I have this question mark of what the academy should be all about then. That's one of the questions that you guys raised. Yeah.
Thank you, Paulo, and also from our side, we honor you very much for all the work you do, and it's an absolute pleasure and joy to be in this wonderful co-creation effort. And I can't wait for the moment to be with you in the same place and give you a gigantic hug.
Yes, that's exactly what I was
here.
thinking.
Same here. I think we are all tired of this virtual space, and
Yes.
we miss hugs. At least I do.
Yeah, very
That's
much.
definitely true. Yeah, let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for this.
You too. Thank you so much, Paulo.
Much love, Paulo. Take care. Have a
Bye.
beautiful rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.